Hey, I'm Daniel. Daniel Prinn. I'm a staff writer here with The Movie Buff, and this is The Movie Buff Show. I'm one of the movie buffs conducting today's interview, and then Arpit, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Arpit. I'm the other buff.
And then Dave, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, sure. I'm Dave Palamaro, and I'm the director and co-writer of a movie called Murder Made Easy. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, guys.
And you're co-editor too, right?
Yes. I am. I co-edited the film as well. That's correct.
Okay.
The first thing which we like to know, Dave, is from the beginning. So, how did you come up with this idea that you want to be a storyteller? And can you just tell us a bit about your journey so far?
Oh wow. Well, geez. Real quick. So I basically would consider myself a Star Wars kid, because I'm old enough where I actually saw the first Star Wars in the theater, and my little 8-year-old mind was kind of blown when I saw that, and I think from then on, I was like, wow, this is amazing, and I, wanted to find out about how they did this. How did they create this magic on screen, and what does it mean to be a filmmaker and all that? And so, growing up, there were great filmmakers that were around then, obviously, like Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola and all those great filmmakers from the 70s and 80s. So I think I caught the bug pretty early on. And then when I was in college, I went to film school, and like a lot of people who go to film school, do some projects. I had a senior project that it was a documentary short. I was lucky enough that it was nominated for a Student Academy Award, and I thought, oh, this is great. I'll move to Los Angeles. I'll win a Student Academy Award, and my career will start. And that didn't happen. I didn't really understand. I didn't know much about the business or anything. So I did move to Los Angeles, but I like a lot of folks, started off as a production assistant and then sort of worked my way into post production. And it wasn't until 2006 is when I started doing my own projects again. And the first thing I did was I did a documentary about a music scene here in LA called Kiss or Kill. And the documentary is called In Heaven There Is No Beer, because I'm a drummer, a musician, and it was a music scene I really loved, that I was a part of, that lasted for about 7 years. And so anyways, that got me back into filmmaking, and I was lucky enough that project got into some film festivals, and we were able to get it out into the world. And then that sort of inspired me to continue. And I co-wrote a horror script called The House Sitter with a good friend of mine who's also a filmmaker. Her name is Suju Vijayan, and she directed a really good film called Playback Singer. She wrote and directed it. So I wanted her to help me write this horror film. But the problem was the horror film needed even for an indie film, it needed a pretty good budget, and it has several locations, et cetera, et cetera. So Murder Made Easy was sort of an idea I came up with. Like, can I figure out a film that's one location that I can actually do on my own, that I don't have to have a bigger budget for? And I'm a huge fan of not only horror, but I'm a huge fan of like murder mysteries, Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes, throwback like good thrillers like Sleuth, which was a play that was turned into a film in the 70s. They remade it, unfortunately, later, but the original had Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine. And then also like Deathtrap, which I believe was also a play. It was turned into a movie with Christopher Reeve and Michael Caine. And so I was like, maybe I can do one location, kind of like self-contained dinner party murder mystery. And I was driving home from work one day, and the actual like outline for the story for Murder Made Easy, the story itself, the basic beats came to me very quickly. And I raced home and jotted down an outline. And from there, I, teamed up with another screenwriter. We wrote it, and we shot it in 2016, and then went to film festivals with it in like 2017, 2018. And it was released 2019 on VOD and also Blu-ray and DVD. So basically, to sum up, like Murder Made Easy was basically, it was made because we didn't have the resources to do a bigger film. And that idea came to me, like, what if I could do like a murder mystery? Like I said, that's smaller, takes place in one location, and that's what we did. So that's basically the hopefully that was quick enough. Just what everybody was.
Definitely. So, in a way, you have answered my another question, but still, I like to ask you that question. That the entire film has been shot in a one location.
Yeah.
So was the budget was the only reason why you shot it in one place, or was there any other reason why you were shooting the entire film on one location? As per me, that was a great idea. It works so fine with the story. So
Primarily, the reason why we shot it in one location was budget. I wanted to challenge myself, or I really wanted to do a film, but I knew we didn't have a budget to do a film that would have multiple locations or a bigger cast. So that was the main reason. But I mean, also, like I said, a lot of these murder mysteries like Sleuth or Deathtrap, and one that I really love a lot is Hitchcock's Rope. I don't know if you've seen
yeah,
Rope.
that was my question. That it did seems
Yeah.
like that it has inspired you in certain way.
I mean, that's like I mean, I know it's not known as his best film. I think it's a great film, but it's personally my favorite of his, one of my favorite for sure, or if not my favorite. And that was a huge influence on Murder Mysteries. I think it's pretty obvious. And so I took a cue from that. Like at that time, the technology was such that Hitchcock had these huge cameras, these huge film cameras, and the film reels that were in the cameras could only shoot 10 minutes of film in one shot. So he had to like, that film was actually made up of like 7 different shots with like quote unquote hidden cuts in between. And it was now it's like not everybody, but a lot of people can do one take movies and all that kind of stuff. But like at the time it was very experimental and he didn't really know if he could do it. But I always loved the way the film looked and how it was sort of like flowing shots that weren't cutty. And so that was definitely the biggest influence on Murder Made Easy from a visual standpoint. Because I could look at that as a blueprint and say, well, this is Hitchcock. He did one location and he was able to do this when the technology wasn't as easy. So let's take that as a cue. And when I got together with my cinematographer, Sherry Kalk, I had her watch Rope. I think she had seen a little bit of it or some scenes from it, but we talked about some films that we wanted to mimic in terms of visual style. And so she watched Rope and took notes, and then we kind of like went from there. But absolutely, yeah. Number one was budget for sure, but then we still wanted to make a good movie, but that's why we did it that way.
Sure. Daniel, you like to ask one?
I was reading up that it took a couple takes to get that first scene down, like the first opening 6-minute shot. So can you talk about just doing that uninterrupted shot as the Marcus comes in?
Yeah, actually, and there is a hidden cut in there. I won't tell you where it is.
We'll have to find it.
Yeah, the movie starts with a pan of a bunch of photographs on a desk, and the idea being that like as we're seeing the credits, you're actually seeing the characters from the movie, and those photos sort of tell a story, even though you may not realize that they're telling a story. But yeah, it's funny because even though cameras are smaller now, I mean, obviously technology is so different. We still didn't have money for like a steady cam. We did test some camera steadying devices. We had like a thing called a glide cam, which is like a cheaper version of a steady cam. Okay. But it just quite didn't work. Like the balance, we couldn't get the balance correct, and you have to counterbalance with weights, and you have to, and plus it's the way it moves didn't quite move the way we needed it to move to pan across photos and then go into the next section. So basically, long and short of it, Sherry basically convinced me to use handheld, and then we did some tests where she could do handheld that would make it a lot more flexible how she can move around, and then we could stabilize it as best we could in post-production. We did some tests that way, and the other piece of equipment that we had was this thing called, it has a funny name, but it's called the Creeper Butt Dolly, which is made. It's this thing made by a grip by Carlos. Oh, I forget his last name, but he's a professional grip in the industry, and he created this thing on his own because as a grip, who are the guys that sort of help, the director of photography move lights and stuff like that. And he created this thing so that a cinematographer could sit on it and you could like adjust the level of it. So it's got like these, I think 6 wheels on the bottom that are those, I forget the material, but it's like the kind of wheels that are on a skateboard, the material, so that it's silent when it slides on the floor. Okay. And then you can adjust the seat so you can sit and get sort of at sitting level or a little bit higher, and then kind of push yourself around. It's almost like a poor man's dolly. And so we rented that, and so that was the other piece of equipment that made it possible. So she could go from standing up and getting something at eye level, and then she could sit down on this thing and then push herself around and still keep the shot going. Okay. So even though like obviously these things are a lot cheaper to buy, we still had to experiment and figure out how we're going to do it. But anyways, to answer your question, so that created a lot of challenges because she had to move from standing up to sitting down. I was actually next to her, guiding her onto this dolly so that she could then push herself around. And there were definitely times when we did takes that got interrupted. Obviously things went wrong. And that was one of them that we did it in rehearsal. And before we shot, we ran through it and had her, she had the camera and everything, and we blocked it. And we did 2 or 3 runs of it, that 6-minute thing in rehearsal, and it went really well. And this actually, the way it happened in the shooting days, it wasn't the first thing we shot. It was, I don't know, maybe the 3rd or 4th scene that we shot. So we already had gotten more used to doing long takes and things like that. We were already kind of gelling as a crew. And so when we did the rehearsals for that particular shot, we're like, oh, this is great. Like, we're going to knock it out of the park. And I remember saying that to Jessica, our lead actress and producer. I was like, oh, we got this. And it took us like 22 times to get it right. I shouldn't have said that. I mean, it was just one thing after another. It was, there was construction outside, like literally it sounded like giant, like transformer robots were fighting like next to the building. Like, I don't know what they were doing. And so the sound came in, and then, the sound guy, our sound guy heard it over his headphones. He's like, we got to stop, because we can't have that coming in over the mics. So that happened a few times. And then the guy who plays Marcus, Edmund Lipinski, he flubbed a couple of lines, and so we had to redo it again. And then it was just one thing after another. And I just remember thinking that, like, we're never going to get this shot. It was very demoralizing in the middle of it. But the best thing about that is that on take 22, or no, like take 21 or 20, whichever, maybe we got 2 or 3 decent takes. Towards the end, we got a decent take, and I thought, this is it. Like, everyone's sick of being in here doing this over and over again. We should move on to the next thing. I was just happy just to get a take of it. And I said, oh, great, let's move on. Let's get the next shot. And then the whole cast and crew were like, no, we really want to do it one more time. Let's get it 1 or 2 bet, one more just in case. And I was like, just shocked by that, because I thought they wanted to kill me at that point. So yes, it was very challenging. And actually another challenging, they were all challenging, but like another one of the really challenging shots was there's one scene in the bedroom, and that also is like a 1 take thing. And it's a very small bedroom, and on the closet in the bedroom, there's a mirror. So not only did we have to move the camera around and do all that kind of stuff, but the camera person and the sound guy had to all avoid the mirror, because if anybody was and myself, I was in there helping in the actors, because the actors could be in the mirror, but I'm saying if the crew was in the mirror, it was a problem, or the sound guy had less room to move around. And if you could see behind the scenes of us maneuvering in that small bedroom, it was like crew gymnastics. It was ridiculous. But when you see it, you're like, you're like, it's fine. But like that was like really complicated to do. But I'm not sure you could actually tell how complicated it was.
I was definitely wondering, because like I definitely thought to myself, oh, that's kind of cool how she gets on the bed in a way. And then when I saw the mirror, I was like, this is not a big room. Like, are they tucked behind the door? Yeah,
that's what made it challenging for sure, because there wasn't a lot of room. And the mirror didn't help. I mean, we wound up using the mirror and blocking it and using it in the scene. But in terms of like, there were takes where obviously someone's head poked in the mirror, crew or whatever. And then what you're talking about is at the very end of that scene, the camera the actors fall down on the bed, and she does too. And the only way we made that work is because she was at that point, she was on that contraption, that dolly, and she was pushing herself around. She had to fall off the dolly onto the bed, the same timing as they're falling. And so I was like guiding her around, and I actually had to hold her. So she couldn't just fall on the bed and then be on the bed fully. Like the way the shot was, she had to sort of be like at an angle. And the only way that could happen is she fell and I caught her, and I had to hold her for the rest of that shot, at that angle. And like at some point I'm like, can only hold her for so long. I mean, she's not a big person. I'm just saying that like it's a lot of weight to just sit there in one position while the actors do their thing. And at some point I could hear Sherry, she's got the camera and she's at the angle, and she's like, I heard her whisper to me, hold it. I was like, I can't hold it. I had to hold it there for a few minutes. So that was kind of funny. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't really tell. I guess it's a good thing how complicated that shot is. But that one was the one that stood out. If you could see behind the scenes, maybe we should have shot something like someone shooting. It was just this weird like gymnastics of like the sound guy, me and Sherry, the camera person, and the actors going around, and like people had to like be in certain positions. So they, like you said, they come in at the right time, but also not be in the mirror, because if it's in the mirror, oh my God, and the sound guy's like trying to, do the thing, but he doesn't have enough room to, and he's like, it took him it was like a complicated puzzle for him to figure out where he needed to be at every moment when people were moving around, so that the mic wouldn't poke into the frame, and also that he wouldn't be in the mirror. So it was, yeah. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, gee, we really made that a lot more difficult on ourselves than we should have. But that was sort of my, vision for the movie. And luckily I had a great crew and they all did whatever they could to help.
Well, it works out because it's all pretty immersive and kind of plays like a play in that way, right? And that's the sense that I think both Arpit and I got.
Yeah, and that was the idea, exactly. And there have been some people who have reviewed it and said, "Oh, this would be a great play," and so that was the idea. Also, to do these long takes, very much like as a play, as you would come and see a murder mystery in a playhouse or something. And when I first started rehearsing with the actors, I told them that I said, because of the way we're going to shoot it, long takes and stuff, memorize your lines and think of it like you're doing a play, and approach it that way, so that you would have to learn long stretches of dialogue like you would if you were performing at a play and stuff like that. So yeah, exactly. It's exactly. You guys totally got the idea we're going for.
Just to add one question to that, Dave, this was my question as well, that, that the long shots and the wide shots play so perfect that, it brings the great output for the film. So how did you plan it? You have explained a bit about how was the planning like, but would you like to give more details on that? That how did you plan it with your cinematographer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, a lot of that really hinged on the space that we shot it at, and I knew I wanted to shoot it at a place, a house or a condo or whatever that had like a kind of an open space feel, so that we'd have room to move the actors and the camera. And our writer Tim Davis, when we were looking for locations to shoot, he said, "I think my place might fit." And at the time, I'm like, "Oh, he just wants to have where he lives in the movie." Like, probably, I was being very cynical. Like, I don't know if it'll work, right? I had never seen this place, but as soon as I walked into his condo, like from the movie, you can tell it's like an open space. The kind of living room opens right into the kitchen. I was like, wow, this is actually perfect, because it's almost like we needed like a sitcom set where one side is open, and so we can move around. And then from there, we did I think it was 6 days of rehearsal at that space. And unfortunately, our cinematographer was booked on something else during the rehearsal time, so she couldn't be there. So what I did was I actually blocked the actors the way I wanted them to in those 6 days, and I shot everything on an iPhone, and I shot it the way I wanted the cinematography to look. And then when we did all that, we shot everything on the iPhone and we blocked it the way we wanted. I went home and edited that rehearsal footage, so I could show Sherry, our cinematographer, this rehearsal footage that was basically like a visual storyboard. You know what I mean? And then from that, we created our shot list. And in fact, we had that rehearsal footage on an iPad on the set when we would shoot, because then she could call it up. She was like, "Oh, what's the next shot? Oh, it's this where the camera starts here and rotates around." You know what I mean? And obviously, like a musician, she transposed it, if you will, from the iPhone, which has a very different lens than the anamorphic lens and the equipment she was using. So things were changed the day we would shoot, but the general idea was there. And me and Sherry sat down and watched the rehearsal footage before we actually shot the movie and discussed it and made a shot list. So I think that was very helpful to her. And she never felt like, "Oh, you're doing my job for me," or anything like that. I think she was very open and collaborative. And I think, I remember asking her afterwards, "Why would you do a film like this where we don't have a lot of money to do the things we really want, and it's a lot of long takes, it's very complicated?" She's like, "Well, because I think you had a plan and you had an idea, you had a solid idea of what you wanted." And I really think like shooting a rehearsal on an iPhone and blocking it out that way, having that tool, I think really helped her. And it certainly helped on the set when she could kind of dial up the rehearsal footage and kind of look at the basic camera moves that I had in mind and where the actors were going to be. And it also helped the actors we were lucky enough to rehearse at that actual space for 6 days, because then they got a sense of the blocking. They got a sense of where the camera was going to move, how they were going to move. And so when we got there and shot, it wasn't like, let's do all that work while we're spending money, shooting. And because it would have been impossible. We needed those rehearsals, at least for me, like I needed to have it planned out, and we needed those rehearsal days to get the blocking right, get the actors comfortable with it, have this footage to show Sherry, our cinematographer, what we were doing. I mean, I guess it is possible to show up and just kind of improvise it. There are a lot of filmmakers that can do it, but I didn't feel confident doing it. I thought it would have been just too much all at once, and we didn't have the time, quite frankly, to do that, So yeah, those things really helped us.
So how long did it take you to shot the entire film?
Well, yeah, so we did 6 days of rehearsal of all that stuff I just talked about, and we actually, believe it or not, shot the film in 7 days. So
That's great.
Oh, nice.
Impressive.
it was very quick. And that's why I knew we didn't have the time to improvise it. That's why I knew luckily Tim and his then girlfriend at the time who lived there allowed us to be there for 6 days. And that's really where time and money was saved. Because I don't know, again, I'm sure you can do it, didn't just come on a set and figure it out. A lot of filmmakers probably do that, but like it just would have taken too much time. And there are a lot of complicated things, like when you move around like that, you got to figure out where the lighting is. And Sherry, had to take time doing that. And if you're just going to wing it, it becomes very time consuming. So.
I read that you guys used a 35 millimeter or like a special lens used for 35 millimeter projectors, if I'm not wrong. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Sherry could get into the nitty gritty technical stuff, but
sure.
There was this company called, so basically she pitched the idea of using an anamorphic lens.
Okay.
Because we used a DSLR, it was a Canon 5D is what we used. And the reason why, and so when she said anamorphic, like for me, I think of, I like cinematography. I like I like planning shots, but I'm not a cinematographer nerd. Like I don't know all the equipment and all the lenses, and I'm not into it to that level. But she suggested, well, first of all, my reaction was anamorphic. I mean, that's for like Lawrence of Arabia. That's for like big outdoor sweeping shots. And here we are in the small, like, kind of condo. Like, why would we use an anamorphic lens? And she said, well, because it'll help make the space feel bigger. You know what I mean? It'll give us it's not a wide angle lens. It's a wider aspect ratio. So you're seeing more of the space, less of the top and bottom and more wide, if you will. And she thought that would help us to cut down on the ceiling stuff, see the existing lights less and have more room for the boom mic and stuff like that. And for her to put lights in like the ceiling area, and also give a wider point of view to make the space feel bigger. And I was really skeptical. I was like, yeah, I don't know. That doesn't sound like. And so she did. She's like, look, let's just rent this anamorphic lens. There's this company in Redlands, California called Vid Atlantic, and they specialize in anamorphic lenses, and they take old lenses and reconfigure them so you can use them on new cameras. And that's what we had. We had this like anamorphic adapter that was made from, I think the lens itself was from like a projector, a Russian projector that he kind of like fitted to an adapter that you could put on new cameras.
Okay.
And so we rented it for, I think it was a day before production. And she shot a bunch of stuff at the location. And then we looked at it, and then we stabilized it, like she did the handheld rig she wanted, and we stabilized it in post. And then she sent it to me and said, what do you think? And I was like, oh, I think this actually might work, So she really had to sell me on it. And that's how we got the look of the film. I never would have, I'm not into the technical side of cinematography, but I never would have, put together small movie in a small apartment or whatever with the anamorphic lens. But I actually kind of liked it. And actually the aspect ratio was quite like, if you look at your screen, it was like this or something. It was like really, and so I actually squeezed it up a bit in post-production because it was so extreme. It's a pretty extreme anamorphic lens. And so the image is slightly squeezed up, but it's like, I just felt that it was too much, like the black bars on the top and bottom were just pretty extreme. So, but I like the look of it, and I would work with those kind of lenses again. It was just very intimidating at first. So, yeah, but thanks Sherry for that. She came up with that idea. So.
Okay, I like the look of the film. Though I'll be honest, when it first started, I was like, wait, are they like the skinny in real life, like kind of thing?
Yeah, it's funny that you caught it. Some people do catch it. People who are really perceptive, or like my friend of mine, his name is Kareem. He's a projectionist. He does a lot of the big film festivals. Like he caught it, but a lot of people don't. And I just thought that it would be too extreme. I mean, maybe now if I went back and did it again, I would leave it. But I haven't seen a lot of movies that have that extreme of an anamorphic lens with the black bars on the top and bottom. And I just thought it would be too off-putting for people. So I stretched it up a little, just a teeny bit to make it look less extreme. But whether it was the right choice, I don't know. Most people don't notice, I guess. So
no, I like it though. And also we had talked about your film inspirations kind of, and you talked about Sleuth and such, but I'd be curious if any if you took any inspiration from stage plays and murder mysteries like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like stage plays and all that, like a community, dinner party, murder mystery theater kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've always been a big fan of that. I mean, obviously, I'm a big horror fan into Star Wars and stuff like that, but I've always been a big fan of those kind of murder mysteries. I think it's great that like Rian Johnson came out with Knives Out, like, because I guess he's also a big fan of that stuff. And that movie did really well. I thought it was a really great film. And I've always been a big fan of that stuff. So when I was thinking of what could we do in a one location, murder mystery automatically came to mind, because those movies, even Rope, I think Rope, Sleuth, and Deathtrap were all plays, I believe, before they were movies. So, they sort of had that feel to them. I think in all of them, I'm trying to think, all of them have one or just a few locations. So there were previous movies that were these great films, these great plays that were turned into movies, but made by great filmmakers that we could kind of take our cue from and at least try for that. And I knew that it was possible, and I like that. I'm a big fan of those things. I like a good clever murder mystery, anything Agatha Christie. I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. My favorite is the Granada. The company Granada did a series of Sherlock Holmes. They tried to do all the short stories and all the novels. They didn't quite get there because their lead actor, the great Jeremy Brett, played Sherlock Holmes. But it's from like the 80s and early 90s, and I just love that. They were very like true to the word of Arthur Conan Doyle's text, but I like many versions of Sherlock Holmes. I like the new ones with Robert Downey Jr. I loved Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch and all that stuff. So I'm a big fan of murder mysteries, and maybe with Knives Out there'll be more of them. I don't know. There are quite a few. Like if you go on Amazon where a movie is playing, there's like people also watch, and you'll find like all kinds of stuff that people make them, and people are constantly remaking Agatha Christie's A Murder on the Orient Express but came out a few years ago. Kenneth Branagh, the new one, and then he's also doing Murder on the Nile, I think. Yeah. So maybe murder mysteries are making a comeback. I don't know. Hopefully. We're ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Now, also, just can you talk about putting the cast together and matching them to each persona, and like, do a lot of them have mostly film experience, or do they have some stage experience as well?
Well, the casting basically came down to our two lead actors, which is Jessica Graham, who plays Joan, and Christopher Soren Kelly, who plays Michael. I had seen them in other movies at film festivals, and there was one film that Christopher had directed and starred in. It was a short film called Chaucer. And I think it was 2015 it was 2015, I think. No, maybe 2013 when I saw that. I was blown away. It's basically like a one-man film, sort of. I mean, and I just thought he was amazing. And then I think a few years later, the two of them were in a short film called Monkeys, and they were both really great. And so I struck up a friendship with them, and I knew I wanted them for the two lead roles. And then Jessica came on as also a producer. And she really helped me with the casting process. And we did audition for the other roles. And it was just a process of, going through and auditioning people and taping the auditions and finding people. The guy who plays Marcus, Edmund Lipinski, it's actually interesting. So the main actor, our first choice for that role, the first actor we had for that, he actually, the day before he was going to shoot, he got pneumonia. Like he got really severely ill. And he couldn't shoot, and I was panicking, and I said, what are we gonna do? We have a 7-day shoot. We only have money to do 7 days. Like everything was planned out meticulously. We couldn't really, and Jessica said, well, how about the other guy? He was really good too. And I was like, oh my God, Edmund, yeah, he was good. And so I called him that night, and I said, I know this is crazy, this is last minute, and I know it's a lot to ask, but can you do this movie? He said, sure, man, I'll come in and do it. He was the nicest guy, and I remember after his audition, even though we didn't pick him first, we really liked him. And he remember him being like, you guys are so nice. It was great to audition for you guys. And we just had to move some day. That's why that first scene you're talking about earlier, the 6-minute shot, wasn't the first thing we shot. We generally shot in order. We just switched that around so that Edmund had a few more days to brush up and get prepared to play Marcus. But that's all we had to do. And luckily he said yes, because that was crazy. I mean, that's what they say when you make movies. They always say you have to be prepared for anything to happen, and it sure did. I did not expect that, but luckily he's a great guy and he's a really good actor. He agreed to do it. As far as most everybody has film experience. I don't know if theater was big for. I think Edmund probably has some theater experience, and I know. I think, yeah, most of them have film experience as far as whether to do theater or film, but they definitely got the gist of what we were trying to go for sure.
Okay, awesome. Arpit, did you want to jump back in?
Sure. I think I have to ask this question. We have been asking this to many people now. I think it will be unfair if you won't ask Dave this question. Dave, if you could play one character, from any superhero, which character you will pick? I think I had to ask that question.
Any character I would want to play in as superheroes? Any superhero?
Yeah, or you could be one. If you could be one.
That's actually pretty easy for me. I don't know if he classifies specifically as it's not like a superhero in the Marvel sense, but he's certainly a superhero to me, and that would be Luke Skywalker. So I'm a big Star Wars fan, and Luke's my guy. So yeah, he's sort of a superhero. He's a superhero in the Star Wars world, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
in case you want to know my and Daniel answer,
I was gonna say, what would be your guys'?
Oh, sorry. Gambit for me.
Oh,
at least just because I like his powers, but I also like the darker superhero movies, and like I don't think I'd want to be him, but like this is kind of a similar answer to what I gave about Nightcrawler the other day. But like I love Dane DeHaan's character in Chronicle, so I'd kind of just want to get more into his mind a little bit. Not be him, not be that hero, but I love that character in that movie.
Cool. And what about you? What would be yours?
I love Cyclops. So growing up, I have seen X-Men a lot in comic books and in a cartoon. So if you remember, in a cartoon, Cyclops used to be the prime character.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I love Cyclops that way. And being a kid, I used to make this ribbon and will paint it red and feel like I'm Cyclops myself. Though in movie they have made Wolverine the main character, but still, Cyclops is something I loved.
All right. I like the fact that you guys gave, at least for me, unusual answers. That's interesting. Awesome. It's pretty sweet, man. But the converse question should be, or inverse, I suppose. If you could be a villain, who would you be?
Okay, Chronicle, Dane DeHaan.
Well, you're right.
If you're asking that question, I mean villain, I think I'll still be not typical villain, but I think I'll be Deadpool. It's an anti-hero, we can say.
Oh, it's right in the line there. I don't know. He's kind of.
Still, if I just have to pick one villain, let's say I'll pick Joker. I think he's great character. He is what I really love. He has the humor, he has the darkness, violence, everything that you can find. I would pick Joker for sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to also go a little unconventional here, but the clue is in behind me. But I would say, I don't know. He's a villain. He's not a superhero villain, but he's a villain. Maybe Hannibal Lecter would be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. You're awful, but you're charming while you're being awful. So I think that might be fun. But anyway, sorry, didn't mean. I just was wondering what your villains.
No. While Daniel asked about the cast and everything, you were talking about Jessica. So you definitely said that Jessica helped you to form the cast together. So being a producer and a lead actress, were there any other impacts she had for the film?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, she basically, so she helped in pre-production. I think budget was a big thing, just helping us suggestions and things like that, trying to organize the budget. Also, casting, I think, was one of the biggest things in pre-production. During production, it's a lot. Everybody, in a small movie, everyone's wearing many hats. And she basically was like our AD, our assistant director. The AD on movie sets basically are kind of like the train conductor. They make sure, okay, we got to wrap this location. We're going over here. They keep everything moving. They keep everybody on schedule. All the nitty gritty of getting things logistically together in the set and keeping it moving. so the director is free to concentrate mostly on like the creative stuff, working with the actors, things like that. So even though it was a small shoot, she kind of did that, and that's a lot, she to be the lead actress and also have that responsibility, but she just wanted to help because she believed in the project. So and just we worked really well together, and just that there were times where I had questions about things, anything on the set, performance, or I needed some advice, anything that came up. I have a story. I don't know. All right, I'll tell it. I mean, so basically we did have to push some things a little bit. We didn't have a lot of room because there were only 7 days to shoot, but there was one scene that does take place sort of outside. It's a bit of a cheat to call it outside, but we had to shoot that a little bit later than we had hoped to. We didn't want to bother the neighbors and stuff like that, but we knew the day before we were going to shoot that we were going to have to go a little bit later, and so there was some concern there that we might bother some neighbors, and so Tim, our writer, he was nice enough to let us shoot at this place, had some questions about that. So, Jessica was there to sort of answer those questions and put his mind at ease that, look, this is a pretty simple scene. We're not going to create too much noise. And sure enough, we were able to do that scene with no problems and no complaints from the neighbors and stuff like that. I mean, we had a film permit and all that, but we wanted to be courteous to those around us. So things like that, where if issues came up, she was able to help resolve them. And that was really, really helpful. So she was great. She was great to work with, and the whole cast and crew was great. But her and I definitely got along, and she was super helpful. So yeah.
Sure. So I have this one more question for you, Dave. That the story itself is very unique, and it's has a horror element in it as well. Thriller element is there as well. There is a bit of comedy there as well. So how were you able to come up with this multi-genre with the story? Can you tell us a bit about the process of bringing all these three together?
Yeah, I think, well, our cue was definitely things like Rope and Sleuth and these things, Deathtrap. I think all those murder mysteries, and a lot of Agatha Christie has it too. Hitchcock too, a lot of his movies, they have that sort of, it's a thriller, it's a little bit of horror, but a lot of them have a little bit of that sort of dark humor to them. And we knew when Tim Davis and I, the writer, when we were working on the script, we knew we wanted to have that humor. Like we knew we were dealing with, like you could do Murder Made Easy as a straight up thing, but I think there were it touches on some serious things, and so we thought that some humor would make it go down a little bit easier. And so we wanted to sprinkle in a little bit of dark humor throughout the script. So we worked very hard on that. And, as far as there's not many, I wouldn't say there's many horror elements to Murder Made Easy, but there are some moments here and there, but that would come from just my love of horror films. You know what I mean? There's not many, but yeah, we definitely knew. I mean, you could play it straight, but we just thought that it would be a good mix to have some dark or black humor in there to sort of, and it sort of does fit the story. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it kind of fits with what the story is, to have a little bit of humor, and maybe it gets a bit darker later. It's not just for the sake of doing it. It kind of sort of fits what's happening. So that was our intent. And yeah, I mean, first time we saw it with a crowd of people, it was a very big relief. It wasn't really like I was looking for people to like gasp, when the murder happens. I was more like, hopefully they'll laugh at the right spots. And I remember when actually the first time we saw it with an audience was at this film festival called the Women in Horror Film Festival. And there's a point in the film where someone makes a comment. One of the characters says, $500 or whatever. I can't remember what the amount is. It's not a lot of money, but it's a lot for an indie filmmaker. And the whole place laughed because it's a lot of filmmakers were in the audience. And I thought, oh, is that funny? I didn't think that was a funny line when we wrote it. But they also laughed at the spots where we, had tried to make it humorous. And that was very satisfying. It felt like, oh, okay, this is going to be okay. I think people are getting it, because I don't know, if you can get the humor and people find it funny, then like I said, it makes it go down a little bit better. Maybe you can win them over. You know what I mean? So yeah,
because you never know that while maybe you write or direct thing, you never know what's gonna work for the audience. Sometimes the silliest things work for them. Sometimes the great effort that you have put doesn't work for them. So yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, like there's one reviewer, I don't think this is spoilers, but we had one reviewer, it was somebody on Letterboxd is like, this movie is just oozes violence and I'm like, really? It's like, did you watch, like everything's like, a lot of it's hinted at, it's very much like a play, like a murder mystery play. There really isn't that much on-screen violence.
It gives you a very play sort of vibe, that you feel like that it can be played live as well. It was quite possible that, we can see it live as well.
Yeah, I like make a play version of it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It would have worked for sure.
Yeah, there have been a couple people that said, "Hey, would you put this on as a play?" I said, "Well, it'd be a fun challenge and a fun thing to try to adapt it to a play, in a theater, a different space, and it's a live performance and all that. But I think I would need a few more years to get separate from it. I don't want the material I've been obviously spent years working on. So it'd be great for someone else to do it if they ever thought it was good enough to be a play, to have them. I would be fun to see someone else adapt it as a play, then go see it. That'd be kind of fun. But yeah, I don't know. I need some. I like to move on to something else at this time. I'm very proud of the film, but we spent a lot of time on it. So
you said that someone was just mentioning about the violence in the film, some of the reviewer. So, as the film goes ahead, the violence itself get bigger and bigger, but instead of showing it in a visual way, you have adopted a different way. You have shown it from the sound manner. So how did you come up with that?
Yeah, actually, I think it's twofold. So the violence, so I think it fits the story. Again, without giving spoilers, when you know the whole story, it fits the story that, like, we didn't want it to be gratuitous. You know what I mean? We didn't want to. It's not a horror film. That's not what it is. And if you look at these other things like Rope and stuff like that, it's a murder mystery. It's a thriller. So we didn't want to be. I don't think the gore was the point of the movie. And also, it does also come to budget. You know what I mean? To do those kinds of things, again, it takes time on set. It takes when we're doing long takes, you got to figure that stuff out. So to do crazy gore and camera and stuff like that just takes time, and it takes preparation. And so I tried to come up with different ways to sort of hint at the violence, or you think you see it but you don't see it, kind of a thing. Or some stuff happens off screen because that way it's just, quite frankly, easier and cheaper to do. But I also think, again, it's not a horror film. There were some things that we wanted to do that we had to figure out, but yeah, I think it fits the story because it's much more of a lighthearted murder mystery than it is a violent hack and slay kind of thing. I mean, I think that, like, if people want to see that we're definitely not the film. So I don't know why that particular reviewer thought it was particularly violent, but it's just funny though. Some of the stuff that you hint at can be just as effective. Like, another audience we saw it with, there is one scene where one of the characters, spoiler alert, gets their head bashed in with a candelabra, but unless I'm mistaken, you don't see anything. Nothing shown on camera, but the woman next to me who was in the audience was like, "Oh man, she was like, it's like, oh, that's so messed up," and I'm like, "We're not even showing anything." So I guess it's true. Sometimes you can imply things, and maybe that people's imaginations can do better than you could if you could show it. So I don't know.
Yeah. So I have mentioned this in my review as well, that your film is very smartly crafted. So how was the editing process was like, and how were you able to compile the entire film?
Yeah, so I originally thought that because the film is comprised of a lot of long takes, there are a couple scenes that are shot more traditionally, but other than that it would be easy to put together. And the first cut did come together pretty quickly, but it actually was more involved than I had anticipated. We showed the film to a lot of folks, friends and other filmmakers, and a producer friend of mine who, produces horror movies and stuff like that for a living. And we got a lot of feedback from people. Some of it was performance, some of it was the length, even though I think the first cut was 87 minutes. So I did take that to heart. I took a lot of constructive criticism, and we did swap out takes, and we trimmed out 11 minutes. So it went from 87 minutes to 76 minutes. And because some of the scenes were, like a lot of films, once you put it into a timeline, you put it together, you can see it differently. And you start really crafting the film at that point. It goes from being a script to an actual movie. And there were some scenes that we just didn't need. And I think there may have been some people might have gone, I think maybe our writer, can't remember, me brought it up. They're like, "Oh wow, 11 minutes is a lot to take out of a movie that's only 80 something minutes." And I thought, well, let's make the movie the best it can be. If we don't need those 11 minutes, then why have a minute? And sure enough, like, nobody watches the film and goes, "Hey, wasn't there a couple scenes that were repetitive that you took out?" Like, nobody misses those 11 minutes. We didn't need them. So, and we did do a lot of swapping out of performances and really digging in and trying to find better takes of things based on a lot of the feedback we got. So it actually turned out to be, it took a lot longer than I thought, and it was much more involved, but I think I think the movie's better for it. I mean, there was actually one scene at the very beginning. So the whole scene where we introduce our two main characters, it's just these two hosts. They're preparing for dinner for people to come over. That was another one shot take. And if you look at it now, it's like cut together in sort of a mishmashy kind of way. And one of my friends, this guy, Andrew Vandenhouten, who's a film producer, saw the movie. It's like, that beginning scene where you're introducing the two characters, why don't you trim it down and just cut it like out of time kind of manner so you can get it shorter? It's like, oh, that's a weird idea. I don't know. And I went back and I tried it. And I was like, I actually kind of like this. And again, we didn't need the extra time, and it helped get us to our first dinner guest and get the story started quicker. And that's just one example of that. Like if I didn't take the time to get feedback for the movie, we wouldn't have had that. So yeah, even though it was a film shot in a lot of long takes, it wasn't just like splicing them together and we were done. It wasn't like that at all. So, and then when you talk about the sound and everything, we had a really good sound guy, this guy Dave Barnaby, who has done sound mixing and sound editing on. He actually did like his main gig, I think, is I'm gonna get this. Hopefully, it's not the wrong show. It's either CSI or NCSI. I can't remember. It's one of those crime shows. But he also had done work on like the first Captain America and stuff like that. And he was nice enough to give us his time. He works out of his home, and he spent like of course of a year on and off when he had time to work on it. And even though it's a simple movie, it takes place in one location, there's a lot of sound design that was going on. And that was another several months to get that done. So even though it seems like a simple movie, the process, if you want to do it right and, do the editing and do the sound design takes a lot of time. So yeah, it took longer than I expected, but like I said, I'm very happy with the end result. So.
Yeah, great. Daniel, like to ask one?
Sure. Yeah. Though about the sound still, the candelabra. What sound did you use to get that bashing?
You'd have to ask Dave that.
Okay.
But it's so funny that you asked that, because there was a lot of, everything's subjective, right? Like, what do you want? Sure. What is the sound? What is the sound of a knife going into someone's body? I mean, it's like there's the actual sounds of these things happening in the real world, and then it's like the punch sound. When you punch somebody, it doesn't sound like Indiana Jones punching somebody, but that sound effect is so effective in the movies. And so there was a lot of that where Dave Barnaby, our sound mixer, he and editor, he knew, because of the movies he had worked on and stuff, what sounds to put where. But I remember one discussion, like that was one, like, oh, I want it meatier. And so he'd have to layer different sounds of somebody punching a cow, beef or a beef slab, whatever it was, to get that sound. Then one discussion was, there's one scene in the bedroom where someone shuts the bedroom door. And I remember I was like, oh, it sounded better in the rough cut. And he's like, oh yeah, I took out the audio from the location. I put in all these layered sound effects, which is what you're supposed to do, right? But it didn't sound real enough. And so he kept the sound effects he used, and then he put back in the sound from the location and mixed those together, just because for whatever reason, I was stumbling on that, like, oh, I want that door to sound a certain way. So he put that back in for me, so it sounded a little more natural. But it sounds silly, but it's not. There were a lot of sound is such a huge part of movies, and it's so much so that if it's doing its job, you don't even notice. And that's a great example of like somebody being hit in the head. Like I said, we did it off camera, so the sound's got to carry that, right? If it's off camera, you don't hear anything. That woman doesn't react the way she does. She's going, oh God, that's terrible, because she's hearing this horrible thud, whatever those sound effects are. So that was a big learning process. And I have to also mention the music. Sean Spillane is a good friend of mine, and he's a guy I knew from being in bands and stuff like that. He started doing film scores for horror films like Chugface and Tales of Halloween, and he did The Woman. And so I knew that he was doing film scores. So when I needed somebody to do the music, I called him up and asked him if he would. I said, it's a really small film and everything. We don't have the budget to pay your normal thing, but would you be interested? He said, sure. And he was super nice and super helpful. And that's a whole nother process where you basically sit with the film composer and you watch the film down and you do what's called a spotting session. You figure out, where do we put music? Where do we leave it just for them to just, open, and dialogue plays out, where we put music. And then once you decide in sections where you want music, what music do you want? And that was another long process, because there's some things he came up with that didn't really work, and he'd go back to the drawing board. There were several songs that were swapped out, and so yeah, it even though this is a very short feature film, a small movie with this one location, still we had to go through the same process every other movie does. And to get there takes time sometimes, and you have to experiment a little bit. Especially a dialogue heavy film was really tricky. I remember sitting down with Sean and I was like this is like a blank slate when it comes to music, because you could have no music. You could have music wall to wall, and trying to figure out where to have music and not have music was strangely, unexpectedly complex, because there are times you want dialogue to play out, or music might step on it and be kind of like an intrusion, and there are times where we want music to. So it took a while to figure that out. So yeah,
sounds good though. I like that was definitely one of my questions with the music, because I love how like the music comes about in indie films, as there's not as big of a budget. So I liked how it sounds jazzy and is very true to the spirit of Murder Mysteries.
Yeah, and that was something different that he had done. His soundtracks are very, he's very eclectic. He's kind of a rock and roll guy, but if you listen to his soundtracks for like The Woman, and he did one called Ghoul that was more like synthy, and The Woman's a little bit different than that. And Jug Face is kind of like, it fits that film because it's more like, it's hard to explain. It's more like kind of like almost like primal kind of instruments and things like that a little bit. And he wanted to do like a jazzy thing, because that was his idea overall, like that might fit this film. But like I said, he basically would, once we decided like this piece needs music from here to here, he would send me that, like this goes here and here, and I would plop it into the movie and just play it, and I would go, oh. And then we had to really start getting more specific, like, oh, this works in this section, but at this place it's a little too loud, or maybe this, and like, yeah, it gets that kind of detail oriented. So okay. But he's great. Like we were lucky to have him, because obviously he's done this before, and he was able to, much like Jessica was helpful in pre-production and production on the set, having Sean Spillane do our music was really a blessing, because he's great and he knew what he was doing. So he made it really easy.
Okay, awesome. In terms of the structure, I'm just gonna look at my questions here. Like, are the separate dishes?
All right. So yeah, there's two things. The menu. So each sort of guest is introduced by the meal they're about to eat, with like what do you call that? A slate that says the meal, and yeah. And that's a happy accident of the rehearsal footage we shot. So when I shot the rehearsal footage to cut together as a sort of visual storyboard for Sherry, our DP, I was doing like a rehearsal cut of the movie, that's when I came up with the idea to have menus separate each guest. Like I didn't have that idea in the script. So it's interesting how some of those things come up while you're editing or whatever. And then as far as the meals, I had a general idea. I wanted to have the meals fit each character. If someone was kind of fancy, they would have a fancier meal. If someone's a meat and potatoes kind of person, they'd have, that's kind of a basic way to think about it, but we try to think of it that way. But the most interesting thing about the meals is working with food. It can be really tricky in terms of continuity in a film, but also if you're going to have on-screen food, it has to actually look good. And I didn't really have a plan for that. I thought, oh, we could just go to the store and get pre-made meals. And it doesn't, that could have been a way we did it, but I don't think it would have looked as good. And this is another case where with all the things that I was preparing for and thinking about for shooting, like a couple of days before actually starting to shoot, I realized I didn't have these meals. And unless we were just going to run to the store and try to find something really quick, I needed to prepare. I need somebody to do this, like a food person. And so I called my friend Jenny Robinson, who's just a really great cook, and like she's the kind of person that invites everybody over for her place for Thanksgiving if they're not going home with the family. She'll cook a big meal, and she's just really great. And I called her in a panic, and I was like, well, we're a couple of days away from shooting, and I need these 4 meals. And I had an idea of what I wanted for those 4 meals, and I went online and had reference pictures. But I was in a panic because I realized this is one thing I didn't take care of before shooting. And she said, calm down, I can do this for you. Send me the reference photos for each of these 4 meals. And what I'll do is I'll cook them, I'll prepare them, and then you can reheat them on each day when you need them. And I'll give you instructions on how to do that and what temperature to reheat them on. And I said, oh, thank you so much. And then so she was literally up till 4 a.m. before the first day we shot, preparing all these meals. And then the morning we were shooting, so she got no sleep that night, and she brought all the meals to us on set with instructions on how to do them. So she saved my ass, and so I'm eternally grateful for her, because people do comment on, basically you're getting a close-up of each meal. Yeah. And it's like anything else. It's like an actor who needs hair and makeup, or it's like, if you're going to use pets, they have to be trained and properly, you can't just throw, I mean, it's the same thing. You're featuring this stuff. It has to look good. It has to look real. You can't just half-assed it. And so that's one thing that I learned, and so she was I just lucky I have really talented friends that were able to like help me last minute, because I didn't know what we were going to do. It definitely was one of those things where like there's so much other things to worry about that it got pushed to sort of like the bottom of the pile until a couple of days before shooting. I'm like, oh God, we actually need these meals. We have to do this. So thanks to Jen, she saved my butt.
Awesome.
And the food tasted good, by the way. Mostly me and Jessica, the lead actress, would eat it. After we wrapped that scene, we didn't need that dish anymore. We would kind of eat it, and it was good. Very good.
I was gonna say, if there's not going to be like a stage play, there could at least be like a food truck, Murder Made Easy food truck kind of thing.
Based on, yeah, she could prepare. You could eat the meals. The roast was quite good, I have to say. Yeah. So, but it's again, and also working with food. Another sort of mentioned it is continuity, like. Sure. Because we have these long takes, every time you do a take, you got to reset everything. And that just is not just having the actors go back to their original position, but it also means the food has to be reset. So if you and I are talking and you're eating half a sandwich, well, guess what? We have to start from the beginning. You need a full sandwich. So how many sandwiches do you need? So it's that kind of thing. You need at least 3 or 4 full sandwiches that you are able to eat, or eat in a way that you can't tell, things like wine and how much wine was in the glass. That became like, we had like a 15-minute discussion about like how Chris, our lead actor, was going to pour the wine in such a way and put it back so that he could put back the exact amount that he was pouring for each take. So it was the same amount each time. Like it became like a complicated math equation to figure this out, because you don't think about continuity with food, but when you're filming and you have to constantly reset and redo it, you have to think about that. So how much food do you have to reset it? How many bottles of wine do you have to like make sure you're covering so that if they're pouring half a glass of wine and they're drinking it, they have enough to do it again, that kind of stuff. It just the detail stuff that maybe you don't think about at first.
What you're saying is no food for your next film.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
Exactly.
Arpit, did you want to jump in?
Sure.
Sure.
The question is not straight away for your film, but it's more for you. So what success mean to you as an individual, and what success mean to you as a filmmaker?
That's a good question. As an individual, for me personally, just, I don't know, having good friends and family, living a good life, that's winning to me at this point, I think, being healthy, certainly, for sure. I think I've learned that over the past year and a half. As far as a filmmaker, I mean, I'm just happy to be able to make films, and I just started writing the next one, so hopefully we can get that off the ground. And I certainly would love to work with a lot of people that were on Murder Made Easy. It was a good crew and we got along, and working with good people is always, if you're going to be under a stressful situation like that, I think I've learned that it's great to have sort of, calm, good people that you sort of connect with, helping you on that journey. So yeah, I feel like if I can get another one made, that's success for me. You know what I mean? Murder Made Easy is a very small film. Obviously we didn't have a theatrical run. We were lucky that it played in a bunch of festivals and that we have the film. It got distribution and all that, but I measure success by like completion. Like, do I get to make another one? And so I hope that after Murder Made Easy, it helps me make the next one. And I sort of take it one film at a time. I think when I was younger, like I said, I had these big plans. I thought, I win a Student Academy Award and I'm going to be a next Steven Spielberg. And, I think that I'm happy just to make another one and see where it leads. And hopefully I become better at it. That's a goal I'd like to set for myself, is every time you do something, you kind of learn and you can kind of better yourself and stuff like that. So, yeah, I know it's not a very like, I don't know, interesting answer or maybe a big answer, but that's what it is for me.
Not really. I think it's very interesting because you have it's simple. I think sometimes the simple became the best. Many people have very complicated wish, and sometimes when you're not able to fulfill those wish, it can turn out to be a negative thing in your head.
Sure.
You have things sorted very simple. I think that's great.
Hey, you keep your expectations low, and then you're like, oh wow, like yeah. Yeah.
That,
No, I
that
agree. I agree with what you're saying. Yeah, sure. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So another question I have for
Also, like,
you
I'm
is,
grateful that, sorry to interrupt, I'm grateful that,
yeah, yeah, sure,
you
sure.
basically Murder Made Easy, one location, we had to black out the windows. We were doing day for night. It all takes place at night, but it was over several days. So you have like a cast of 7 and a crew of whatever, another half dozen stuffed into a small space. I have to say that, like, I'm really grateful we got to shoot the movie before COVID, because that would have definitely derailed us. There's no way. I mean, because we were just all breathing the same air in a small contained space with no windows being blocked off. It would have been a disaster. There's no way I could have shot it. Nobody would want to put themselves in that kind of risk. So I'm very grateful that we were able to get that done before all this stuff happened. So anyways, it's
Yeah,
just something that I can look back now and like realize, oh wow, we took that for granted, that,
yeah.
yeah.
I think we all took many things for the granted. I think COVID was the time that has taught us that, we should not take things that granted, we should take things seriously. So
Yeah,
yeah. So
100%.
another question I have for you, Dave, is that, indie as a genre, it's very tough. Do you believe that it's more creative and vocal than the mainstream cinema is?
Hmm. Well, I think what I would say is, if you're talking about a bigger budget film, I think their goals might be a lot different than, and like, I do think that, because I love watching indie films. I think there's a lot of things on streaming that aren't so great, but there's a lot of things that are really amazing. Like, I love discovering these new small little indie films. Like, for example, there's a film called Lapsus. I don't know if you guys have seen it, directed by Noah Hutton, and it's a great little low budget sci-fi film. And I was reading interviews with him, and all the things that they had to do with a really low budget to do sci-fi, and they had to come up with clever ideas, and it's just a really good story. And I think in that way, indie cinema, a lot of it can be schlock and terrible, but I mean, but in terms of, like, sometimes the idea is more important than the budget, and you also you don't have the same uh, pressures, you know what I mean? Like, if you're a bigger budgeted movie, now you're talking about studio money, now you're talking about producers, and they have an investment, they want to make the money back. So it just, it's going to create a different creative environment. The indie, the flip side is that you don't have the budget, but you might have more freedom to come up with whatever story you want to do. Like with Murder Made Easy, we didn't have, and we had producers, but I was lucky that I was able to self-fund the movie. So the only person I really had to answer to was myself. Once you get producers involved, like financial people involved, certainly a movie studio, that's a different equation. And big budget films like the Marvel films or the Star Wars films, I mean, those films are made to make money. They're not made to, I mean, I think the people involved generally want to make good movies and good stories, but these are like $1 billion investments. So it's a completely different thing. You know what I mean? It's always nice when you see something, like, I'm trying to think, like Annihilation, or way back when, like something like Fight Club, films that were like studio films, but they do something a little bit subversive and different. You're like, ooh, but yeah, I guess that answers the question. I mean, I think that, like, there's that separation, right? Everybody talks about how, like, there's no middle budgeted movies anymore for adults. I think it's like on to TV, and that kind of stuff's on, like Game of Thrones or stuff like that. But I still like seeking out, I just like a good story. And so I don't know. My opinion is that sometimes the bigger budget films, maybe they're not creative enough, but I've never worked anything like that. And when I understand, it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of money involved. When you have a movie that has I don't know, $300 million budget, or is expected to make $1 billion, or else is considered a failure, I don't know. That's got to create a lot of pressure on a lot of people, so.
Lots of egos from the producers, right? Everyone wanting
Yeah.
their own vision.
Yeah, I mean, you can read. I mean, I like to consider myself a bit of a film historian, and you can read about stories about, like, one of the famous ones is David Fincher's Alien 3, and how the studio, was constantly they wanted things. And it was before David Fincher was kind of David Fincher of now, where he could kind of do his own thing, and it was a horrible experience. Didn't Guillermo del Toro, he worked on that movie Mimic? That was like a studio film, I think. I'm not sure, that may not have been the best. I don't know. Or like David Lynch with Dune, like that was an example of a big, yeah. And I don't know if it was a studio. I don't know specifically the studio, but I think there was a lot of pressure. That's what I mean. It's like David Lynch, to me, does best with like a Blue Velvet. You know what I mean? Like his foray into big budget sci-fi kind of I would argue even Ryan Johnson with The Last Jedi. I mean, not Last, yeah, Last Jedi, yeah, Last Jedi. Sorry, getting the movie screwed up. Yeah, like that movie took me a couple of viewings to really appreciate it. I think it's a well done movie, and I like Ryan Johnson a lot. I think he's a really talented, smart director. But I remember when he was announced to do the Star Wars film, my first thought was, gee, I hope he doesn't become like the blockbuster guy, because I really like Ryan Johnson's smaller films. And then it was great to see him do Knives Out after that, you know, which is like, oh, that's his, to me, that feels like his sweet spot. You know what I mean? And I love seeing creative people do what you're talking about, which is like the sort of indie mentality, something a little bit different, something a little, I mean, I like big blockbusters, but I also love to find something that's like, oh, wow, it's kind of different or whatever, you know? So
in a way, you can say straight from the soul, the indie movies. You can say that.
Yeah, and I think that's the freedom. That's the trade-off, right? You don't have the budget, but you might have more freedom to do interesting things. And I still, you know, I'll go see the big blockbusters, but I also love finding things on streaming that are like I said, Lapsus is a great movie, great example of that recently, where like it just came out of nowhere and it's not a big movie, but it's a really, really good movie. And it's great to see what indie filmmakers can come up with creatively, because they don't have the money to just throw effects at everything and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Daniel, you like to ask one?
Sure. I'll just go in. I think this is my last line of questioning, and I just wanted to ask about the characters. Like with the character types here, like, has there anyone in your life, Dave, that has gone up to you and been like, is that supposed to be me?
No. Have you ever been to Los Angeles? People don't act like that. I don't know. I mean, so honestly, the characters in Murder Middies are kind of like caricatures. They're like cartoon characters in a lot of ways. They're like exaggerated versions of, you know, you have like the annoying hipster, and you have like the you know, the professor who thinks he's great at something, and then you have like the author who's so self-absorbed that's all she talks about is herself. I mean, these are very like exaggerated. And we knew, again, it goes back to that humor and the comedy. Like we knew we wanted these characters to be not quite realistic and over the top and cartoony to a certain extent, because it plays into the larger story, we thought, you know? So, I mean, the closest thing would be like the filmmaker character. I mean, Daniel plays him so great, so smarmy and kind of annoying, but like, yeah, there are people that are kind of like that. I mean, let's be honest. I'm sure we've all, you know, met people like that, or like the character is sort of a hippie. I mean, she's so over the top. You know, there was one reviewer who actually is a vegan, and she reviewed the film. She liked the film, but she's like, "Oh yeah, we're all like this." And I actually wrote her back. I'm like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." You know, I mean, I mean, you know, like that's fine. You know, you're a vegan or vegetarian, but you know, people that are sort of like so annoying to the point that like they intrude on you to let you know how much they, you know, how vegan they are, that kind of thing.
I grew all this myself.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so it's less to do with the type of people, more to do with like overbearing people that, you know, that you just can't stand. So they're you know, loosely based on things that you might come across, people you might come across, but they're so over the top that it's like, you know, hopefully people can laugh at it and not take it personally.
And I feel like that woman in the theater who was like against like the beefy sound of the candelabra, I feel like she might have been a vegan because of because it does sound kind of beefy.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's a compliment to, again, Dave Barnaby, our sound person, who made it sound realistic, because in actuality nothing was happening. But yeah, that was quite, I love that. And that was great. And she's like, man, she said out loud after that scene, she goes, man, that's messed up. But I was giggling because because again, we don't show that much violence, but it was great that was effective. So
now, also, well, how fun was it creating these caricatures with your screenwriter Tim Davis?
It was fun. I think once we kind of went down the path that we were not going to take this in a serious way, we're going to have humor in it, I think that we went with it, and I think it was fun to write. It was fun to try to inject it with this dark humor, and it was really fun to see the actors, all of whom did a great job, like bring their characters to life. I mean, there were several times when we were rehearsing with Emilia Richardson as the actress who plays Cricket, the sort of hippie character. And I remember when I was shooting the rehearsals on the iPhone and we were rehearsing the scenes, Like there were several times where the actors were just like laughing. I couldn't get through their scene because she was so funny. Like, yeah, it was really, it was great to see them kind of ham it up and bring that energy to the roles. And I think they all got it. Like I remember Daniel Ahern plays Damien, the filmmaker, the smarmy kind of hipster filmmaker. And I remember we auditioned a couple people for that. And then he came in and he auditioned and we were like, I remember looking at Jessica, I was like, that's the guy. Like, he's it. Like, he totally gets it. And by the way, like, Daniel's a super nice guy. He's not like that at all. But in his audition, he just nailed it. Like, he just got it. So, and I remember actually asking Daniel, I was like, you're doing this so well. I know you're not like this. Like, I asked him what you asked me. I'm like, is there somebody you know you're basing this on? He's like, no comment. So I think he actually is friends with or knows somebody that's that annoying. And like that was sort of an inspiration, but he's great. Like he's like they had fun with it, and I give the credit to the actors for bringing that to their roles.
Okay, I love that they can tap into people that might be like someone might not come up to you, be like, "Did you base this on me?" But maybe they'll come up to your actors, like, "Yeah, what the hell, man?"
I'll just point to them. Hey, they did. You blame them, you know.
It's them. They were.
But I mean, we all had it. It was all in good fun. Like Jessica, she's like a vegan or whatever. Like she never took offense to the hippie character. You know what I mean? Like I think everybody got that it was. It's so exaggerated and over the top that I think no one's ever been offended that I can remember that was angry about it or anything like that. So
yeah, borders on satire in that way, right?
Yeah, or at least they haven't told us
that
they were offended. So
fair enough. Arpit, did you want to jump in with yours, or I don't know if you have some.
I have two last questions.
Okay.
I have two last questions. So the question which I like to ask is why one should see your film and where one can find your film.
Why should somebody watch my film?
Yeah, why they should see Murder Made Easy.
I can't think of one. I'm just kidding. There are a lot of other things they can do with their hour and a half to launch my. No, well, look, if you I feel like Knives Out did well, and it was great to see. It's such a great movie. He's so talented, Rian Johnson. But if you like a good old time murder mystery, Agatha Christie kind of thing, a Hitchcock thing, or if you've ever seen Sleuth or Deathtrap, dinner party murder mysteries, those would be kind of a thing where you can go to a dinner party and they act out a play and you figure out who did it. If you like that kind of thing, check out Murder Made Easy. It really, it's just a love letter to those old, murder mysteries and just a good old fun time. That's what we were going for. I think for folks that like it, they get it, and won't be everybody's cup of tea. Again, it's not for hardcore. We've been lucky is that we've been to a couple horror film festivals. Our distributor is called Terror Films, who normally do horror films, and our other distributor for Blu-ray is Scream Team Releasing, and they mostly do horror. So we're sort of horror adjacent. But I would say if you're a hardcore gore hound, this is probably not the movie for you, because like I said, we don't really show a lot. But if you just like a good old fashioned murder mystery, I'd say check it out. You might dig it. And you can see the movie on VOD. It's on. You can rent it or buy it on Amazon. You can see it for free, like on Tubi and Roku and Google Play. Most VOD platforms have it. And we are selling the Blu-ray is on. Scream Team is our distributor for that. So you can go to screamteamreleasing.com and you can get a Blu-ray. I think they still have some that are signed that you can get too, that come with like a poster and stuff like that. So yeah, we have it available on all the different formats. And I would say the Blu-ray here, I have right here. I just happen to have it. This also has extras too. So a lot of the questions you're asking about, we've got commentary on there, and some of that rehearsal footage is on there too. And there's a little bit where we explain how we shot it and all that kind of stuff. So if they really, really like it, they can go to Scream Team Releasing and pick up a Blu-ray.
That's good. So the last question which I have for you is that we at Buff are all the movie lovers. So if you could recommend our viewers 3 films, which 3 films that will be?
I recommend 3 films, like 3 new films, or?
It can be anything. It can be some classic film. It can be some indie films, whichever 3 films.
Oh, God, yes. Like I said, during this pandemic, I've been just watching a lot of indie films, and there's been some really good ones. So I would recommend Lapsus by Noah Hutton. Sci-fi. It's sort of like a gig economy commentary. Lapsus is great. There's a couple of really good ones. I would say, well, this one's gotten a lot of attention, but Saint Maud I thought was really good.
Yeah, I have reviewed that as well. It's a great film.
Saint Maud. A friend of mine, we actually showed Murder Made Easy with one of her short films a couple of years back, but she just did a feature film called Censor, which just came out, and I like that a lot too. And I'm also going to throw in, what's that?
Sorry, I was gonna ask, is that one on Shudder or not?
No, Censor is not. I believe it's, oh God, I'm going to get it wrong. It's, I don't know, we can look it up. I don't think it's A24, but it's one of those companies. Ugh, I'm blanking. Okay. It might
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it was really good. It's really good, and her short film was great too. That she played in front of Murder Made Easy. Basically, I'll have to give you a synopsis of her short film, but it played in front of our film, which is funny because they're not similar. But it was called Shortcut, and it's a boyfriend and girlfriend in the car, and the boyfriend's just ragging on his girlfriend, like, why do you do this? Why do you do that? And he's like, we're lost, and he's like, I gotta take a pee. So he gets out of the car. He takes a whiz, and like then there's a low angle shot of one of those like garden cutters, those big things coming up from the ground.
The shears.
Shears. And then there's a close up of his penis, and it snaps off his penis, and that's the end of the movie. It's called Shortcut, and I thought it was the funniest thing.
How long? Movie. Was that like 3 minutes long?
Yeah, it was super short. And I was just laughing my ass off afterwards. And I'm like, why did they show this movie? It's like not like our film at all, but I thought it was so funny. And I stayed in touch with her, so it's cool to see her. She's doing really well with Censor. It's gotten like I said, they have a really good distributor. It's not A24, it might be a different one, but it might be Neon. But yeah, and she's doing really well. So, anyways, her name is Prano Bailey Bond, I believe is her name. Anyway, and one more recommendation would be Psycho Gorman. Have you guys heard of that one?
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, I really dug it. It's just completely absurd and ridiculous, but I loved everything about it. So there you go. Lapsus, Saint Maud, Psycho Gorman, and Censor. There's 4 recommendations for it.
Okay, that's great.
Awesome. Now,
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I had one from like what you were talking about, how like you don't consider your film horror, but it's playing at all these horror festivals. So I find that like very interesting. Like, what genre do you consider your film?
I mean, I think it's a thriller. I think it's it has some elements of horror, like I said, here and there, but that's been great because we've gotten reviews on horror sites. We've gotten some horror fans who it's close enough where they're like, I'll check it out. Both our distributors, Terror Films for VOD and also Scream Team for Blu-ray and DVD are both mostly they specialize in horror stuff. Okay. But with that, we've gotten some of the horror. Like I'm a big horror fan, so I get it. Like if I love a horror film, I'll support it. So we have picked up some of those fans, which is great. Because my next film will be a little closer to a horror film, and I love horror, but I wouldn't classify it certainly not as a horror film. It's sort of a thriller, but maybe has some horror elements. But it's been great to see some horror fans like embrace it. You know what I mean? But again, if like there were some people who are like bummed out because they see the cover or something like that, and then they watch it like, oh, there wasn't any gore in that. So like I said, some people just love gore. There was this one online reviewer, I'm blanking on his name, but he reviewed it on YouTube, and like his intro to his YouTube review channel is like just a montage of the most gory things from movies cut together really quick with like heavy metal. And it's like, oh, this guy's gonna hate this movie. And then he liked the movie. Like I was totally shocked. He liked Murder Made Easy. I was like, but based on his montage intro, I was like, we've got nothing like that in our movie. But surprisingly he liked it, so that's very cool. I'm very grateful that some horror fans have embraced it as well. So
okay, awesome. So you don't mind people thinking it's horror, but you just kind of want to keep people's expectations in check.
Yeah, specifically like it's not a gore, like it's definitely it's not a gore fest, obviously, right? That's not what it is. So some people, I know there are some subset of horror fans that they go in for that. They want to see that specifically, and that's not what Murder Made Easy does. But if you like a good thriller, a good murder mystery, try to figure out what's going on, that's where we are right there.
All right. Yeah. Awesome. So Dave Palamaro, a writer, co-writer, or story by credit, I think you have.
Yeah. Story by, director, and co-editor.
Exactly, yeah. So for Murder Made Easy, this has been the Movie Buff Show. Thank you for chatting with myself and Arpit.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me on. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to watch the movie and do this interview. Much appreciated.